Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to round 24 coverage of the Zurich 1953 Candidates Tournament. At the beginning of this round, all four leaders were within half a point of each other. Reshevsky and Smyslov tied at the top, and a half point behind we have Bronstein and Keres. And round 24 featured a clash between two of the leaders, a very exciting game between Paul Keres and Vasily Smyslov. So although the leaders are bunched up at the top, there is another difference there, which is Smyslov has already had his bye, whereas the other three players, Keres, Bronstein, and Reshevsky, still have their byes coming up. So in a sense, they're all playing catch up with Smyslov at this point. So let's take a look at this game. I think certainly a must-win game for Keres, and he really put his all into it. A very exciting game. So briefly, let's take a look at the players. Here's Paul Keres, the Estonian Grandmaster. Here's a picture of him taken around the time of the tournament. Let's see. Yeah, so a couple pictures in that area. And then Vasily Smyslov. Let's see if we can find a picture of him from that time. Yeah, here's a picture from 1953. This is Smyslov at the time of the tournament, and another one taken there. Not so good. That's a pretty good picture. Okay, so interesting clash. Keres with the white pieces starts off with c4. So you might be surprised, but we are going to get a quiet opening in this must-win game, which is one of those things happens surprisingly often. I guess the idea is if you start out with a real sharp line, pushing for the center immediately, d4, e4. It can bring on an early clash of the pieces, and things get exchanged off, and then it can often fizzle out into a draw. And there's also all these forcing lines you have to worry about in preparation. So if you play quietly, which is what we get here, Smyslov here is going for a Nimzo-Indian type of setup against the English. But Keres just develops naturally with his pieces. So we get into a symmetrical English after c5, e3, and bishop e7. Now bishop e7 is a very quiet move. So in a way, Smyslov is playing this waiting game too. He's just waiting to see what Keres has in mind. He's not playing the most direct or aggressive moves here. The top choices in this position are moves like knight c6, and d5, very logical moves, immediately putting pressure on the center. This bishop e7 move, well, it prepares early castling and it's just kind of waiting to see what happens. And Keres is still keeping his cards close to his vest. The most popular move here by far is the d4, and just gaining some early space in the center, but he's delaying that, and so we're in kind of an obscure sideline at this point, where both sides are avoiding any immediate conflict. Castles, bishop b2, b6. So again, keeping kind of a symmetrical setup and just waiting to see what white is coming up with. So now finally, white plays the move d4, and we get a more typical kind of position you might see. And in fact, after d5, bishop d3, and knight c6, we've transposed into a line from the Queen's Gambit decline. So we're no longer in actually the English opening, although I think it's probably, I would still classify it as an English opening just because of the way it started, but it often happens with the English opening that will transpose into other openings. So we're in a line of the Queen's Gambit decline. In fact, this resembles the Tartakover-Makaganov-Bondarevsky line with the bishop fianchetto. And there will probably be an exchange here, maybe opening up a line for that bishop at some point. But for now, it just sits here behind the pieces, waiting for things to happen. So still kind of a quiet-looking position, but there are some dangers lurking behind the scenes here. Well, for example, you can't put the queen on c2 because the knight will come in here and fork those two pieces. If you go queen e2, this is a line that Bronstein mentions, just as an example. This turns out not to be a good move because knight comes in here to b4, kicking the bishop. The bishop drops back. And then after this exchange, black can actually grab a pawn here, take out the knight, and just grab this pawn on d4. And, well, white has some compensation, but basically black is up a pawn here and is in pretty good shape. So there are some things going on behind the scenes. You know, these lines can open up quickly, and these are the lines to watch out for. This exchange here, opening up the bishop and the knight hopping in. So Keres plays more circumspectly. He plays the rook to c1, preventing any kind of nonsense. And now rook to c8 was played, and rook to e1. So both sides have centralized their pieces. And at this point, Smyslov is the first one to actually try and cause some trouble. And he starts out with the move knight b4. So he is perhaps hoping to get some exchanges in. He would certainly be content with a draw in this position. He's a half point above Keres, and in effect he's in the lead because he has one more game that he has to play compared to the rest of the players because he's already had his bye. So a draw would probably suit him fine, and if he can throw a few pieces out and get some things traded off, that probably suits his strategy well. Now Keres doesn't want to trade off that good bishop. He drops it back. And then knight e4, another knight coming in. So like I said, stirring up some trouble. So now things start happening. a3, kicking the knight. You can't let these pieces hang around forever. Knight takes c3. And the very interesting reply, rook takes c3. So obviously Keres had planned this in advance because he later goes into a kingside attack using this rook on c3. But the very natural bishop takes c3 fails to knight a2. Forking the pieces, and that's good for black. So I mean, it's not like it loses material, but black gets this good bishop off the board, and so he's very happy with that. So rook takes c3 is played, and now there are ideas in the position like swinging the rook over for a kingside attack, and that's really more of Keres's mode of operations. He's a famous attacking player and well known for his deep combinations. So he must have planned this. That's all. That's what my point was. In this position, when he kicked the knight, he must have recognized what was happening and decided at that point to go for the attack. So you always have to choose your moments, and I guess this is when he thought he could get his attack going. And of course, black has given up a key defender of the king side, so there is some justification for this. So the knight now drops back to c6, and now knight to e5. The chess engine doesn't quite approve of the attack from this point out, so just to warn you. But sometimes even slightly unsound attacks can lead to victory if your opponent gets lost in the complications. So perhaps a quieter move like advancing the c-pawn is the computer's recommendation. C takes d5 has been played before in the database. So knight e5, well, it's a forceful move. And after knight takes, not taking back with the pawn, but taking back with the rook. And so that combination of knight e5 and rook e5, that's what the chess engine doesn't approve of. It would really prefer taking with the pawn at this point. And that's a more solid way to play. If you take with the pawn, you know, you've got a strong outpost here. And you can play for some long-term positional advantage, maybe, but you won't get any great attack, and that's what Keres wanted for this game. He wanted to get an attack going, see if he could really break through. So bishop f6, kicking the rook, and the rook doesn't run away. It goes over to h5, and now he's setting up for some action on the king side, and the position is already a bit dangerous. So, for example, if black does a nothing move, like just retreating the bishop to a8, that's a move that does absolutely nothing, then already he can sacrifice the rook here, and this is a winning attack. King takes, queen comes out with check, king goes back, and the rook swings over to h3, and now there's a mate in one threat, and the only way to stop it is with the bishop, so you get the bishop back, so you've earned at least one piece and a pawn for your rook, and the attack continues, because after the bishop comes here and you grab it, you still have this serious threat here. I guess f5 needs to be played to block, to give the king an escape square when the queen runs in. And the play will continue, but actually white has a winning attack here. So this is already a dangerous position. And Smyslov defends with the natural move g6. And now we get one of the great the great moves in this position. So as an attacking player, see if you can figure out what's the best way for Keres to continue the attack. And I'll warn you, it's not objectively the best move in the position, but it's the way that Keres chose to continue the attack. So see if you can think like a grandmaster for a moment. How would you attack here? Okay, I'm going to give the answer away. Keres played the move rook c to h3, lining up on the h-file and ignoring the fact that his rook is hanging here. And now Smyslov sat and thought for a long time. There is only one move here that keeps an advantage for black. The computer has given an advantage to black ever since that knight e5 and rook e5 exchange earlier in the game. So it thinks black is better, but the defense has to be very careful. So see if you can find the one move that keeps an advantage for black in this position. So this is your second chance to think like a grandmaster, this time on the defensive side. Okay, I'm giving the answer away. The answer that the move that Smyslov found is the only move that keeps the advantage for black, and it's d takes c4. Just ignoring the rook that's hanging there. Not only ignoring that, but also ignoring the fact that the rook is now going to take on h7 and threaten to cause damage here. Although it's important that you've got the bishop guarding the h8 square, so no direct mate is threatened, but certainly a very scary looking attack on an open h-file. So what happens? Let's back up. What happens if you take the rook? So taking the rook, the queen comes in, obviously, and now there is a mate threatened. And there's only one move here that really avoids damage. You get the rook out of the way, so the king has an escape. And now, does the attack fizzle out here, or does it continue? The answer is it continues with first with the move rook g3, or you could start with the move a4. But let's throw in the move rook g3, check. And the king runs to f8, and then a4. And that's the move you had to see to make this attack work. This bishop coming here on this diagonal is a serious threat. And this is actually, it's not entirely clear, but it's an advantage to white in this position. So he has a really strong attack here, and should go on to win, even with best play by black. So those are the key ideas. The line continues, queen d6 to defend against this, and then queen h6 check, driving the king to e7, and then c5. And, well, it's a complicated position, but the king is getting chased around. If we look at the material, a rook and two bishops, white is still a rook down, but he has enough of an attack that actually he has the advantage in this position. But, of course, it's horribly complicated. So, anyway, Smyslov, in writing about this game, said, basically, he looked at this, and he looked at taking the rook, and he really could not see a forced win for white. And as that example line I gave, which is best play for both sides, shows, it's not an immediate win, but it is long-term pressure for white, which is more than adequate compensation for the sacrifice. So actually white wins in that line. He couldn't calculate a win, couldn't see how white was winning, but he just felt it wasn't right to take that kind of chance, and he looked around for other moves, and that's when he found this move, d takes c4. And as Bronstein writes about it, this really does a whole lot. It opens up the diagonal for the bishop, so there's ideas for the queen coming here and generating some counterplay if this rook is no longer guarding that square, or simply grabbing the pawn in some cases. And the other key idea is that, well, this rook is still hanging over here on h5, and so that means that when the rook moves, black is going to have time to push this pawn to c3, and shut down this bishop, which is obviously real dangerous on this diagonal. If white opens up this h-file and chases this bishop off the diagonal, then it's pretty much game over. So two really star moves in a row. First the rook to h3, and then the reply, the defensive reply, d takes c4, combining ideas of defense and offense. So at this point, the attack just kind of fizzles out. Rook takes h7. There was a suggestion here. He could have tried queen g4. Bronstein gives this idea as a way to try and go for a draw. After queen g4, pinning the pawn so that the rook is not hanging, black can push on with c3, bishop takes, and the line Bronstein gives is rook takes, queen takes here, queen takes, and we get into this kind of position where at the end of it he's got rook c7, and black grabs the rook and white grabs the bishop. And if we look at the material, black is still a pawn up, but this is a drawing endgame with best play, opposite colored bishops, and black's extra pawn is somewhat messed up. So, but even in this line, after queen g4, c3, kicking the bishop, bishop takes, and instead of taking the bishop, black can now play the move queen to d6, hitting this pawn over here, and just kind of holding the position together. And this rook is still hanging, and it's a position that is actually better for black. So even with best play, black can still get the advantage from this position. So the attack just wasn't sound with best play. And after d takes c4, there's really not a lot for white to do except to continue with the attack like Keres did. He grabbed the pawn here, c3, hitting the bishop and trying to shut it down on this diagonal. Now queen to c1, a tricky move, because right here it's still not safe. Like I said, the attack is fizzling out, but it still requires precision. So can you see what goes wrong if you just grab the bishop here? Okay, if you take the bishop, then it's just queen to h6, and game over. There's an unstoppable mate now in the corner. You just sacrifice this rook, and the queen goes to h7 with mate, and there's no way to stop that. So it still requires some caution here. Black ignored this c takes b2 idea. He didn't grab the bishop, but he grabbed the pawn and puts the queen on this really good diagonal. And so that's what I said. It's when d takes c4 was played, it opened up that line for the queen to get to this d4 square. It had to be preceded by the move c3 to shut down this bishop. But now black has really an ideal defensive setup against these threats on the h-file. So he gave away the h-file, but he has the center and he has a defense. So queen h6 anyway, getting over here, trying to stir up some trouble, but it's just not enough to break through. There's just adequate defense to stop everything. Rook f to d8 was played, getting the rook out. And bishop to c1 was tried. This bishop was still hanging. Bishop to g7, chasing the queen away. Queen goes to g5, and this queen comes back to chase it back further. Queen goes to g4. Paul must have been getting kind of discouraged at this point. Yeah, it's obvious that black has beaten back the attack, and now there's nothing much going on, and he's just up material. He's up pawns. If you look at the rooks and bishops, their piece material is the same on the board, but there's this extra pawn here. And yeah, black is just winning in this position. He's got this advanced c-pawn, which goes forward. Bishop to e2 was played. Sorry, cancel that. Bishop e2. Rook to d4, coming out and chasing the queen away. f4, blocking the attack on the queen. Now, rook to d1. It's a temporary sacrifice because after bishop takes d1, a very nice finish from Smyslov. Queen d4 check. And actually, there's a forced mate here, but at the very least, you can see that this bishop is going, and black is going to be at least a queen up after pawn takes bishop. So Keres resigned at this point, and this game cemented Smyslov's position in the lead. In other games, Bronstein just took a short draw against Kotov. He had the white pieces, so it's kind of a curious result. But anyway, and then Reshevsky versus Geller. Reshevsky had really an excellent game against Geller, and then at the end he had a winning position in the middle game. He exchanged down into a rook endgame where he was 2 pawns up and just winning, and then it was a one-move mistake where Geller found this really clever stalemating idea, stalemating type of tactic, and used that to win a pawn and then go into a drawn endgame. So that ended up with a draw. So actually in 2 rounds in a row, the previous round, Reshevsky against Kotov, he turned a draw into a loss in the endgame, and then in the game against Geller, he turned a win into a draw. So in 2 successive rounds, he came up a half point shorter than what he could have been, because he actually played quite well in both of those games up to really a certain critical point in the endgame. Just missed something in both of those games. So with this win, Smyslov is in the lead, and both Reshevsky and Bronstein have fallen back. So let's give the actual numbers here. Let's see. After 24 rounds, we have Smyslov with 14.5 points, Bronstein at 13.5, so he's a full point back, and Keres at 13, so he's 1.5 points back, and Reshevsky just dropped a half a point. He was tied with Smyslov in the previous round. Now he's just a half point behind at 14. But Smyslov has the advantage in that he has 1 extra game to play, and he's a half point ahead. So that's how it stands after 24 rounds. Hope you guys enjoyed this coverage, and stay tuned for the next round. See you then. Bye.